I'm gonna unmute you. You're on.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up, buddy?
Yeah.
Not much. All right. Or how's it going with you?
Pretty good.
Do you want to start things off with the main thing I wanted to talk about? Because you seem like
Yeah, knock
you're a
us
little.
out, dude.
Okay. So basically, the main thing I wanted to talk about was abortion. Um, followed by I have a few other things. Just I kind of wanted to discuss, kind of like not like super seriously. What do you want to start with?
Fuck, we can do abortion real quick, because this one is like really, I've done this a million times.
Okay, but so I want to argue it on two fronts. So you got the scientific front and you got the philosophical front. What do you want to start with there?
Whichever, with the scientific one.
Okay. So first, I know we have to go through this. How do we define us as human? So from a scientific point of view, we can look at consciousness, being alive, the human form, the ability to think and feel, right?
I mean, my definition of human is your genetics. That's what I define it as. But like this question of what do we define as human? This is a moral
I know,
question, not a scientific one, or a philosophical question, not a
right,
scientific one, right?
but we can use science
Sure, science
mixed
can
with
inform
like
our
the
answer. Sure.
philosophical. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, so consciousness. So first of all, research shows that consciousness doesn't occur in fetuses for about 24 to until about 24 to 28 weeks through, right?
Okay.
And then the ability to feel pain is also something that isn't right off the bat.
Okay.
And the ability to interact with one's environment is you can also like argue that fetuses don't interact with their environment until they exit the womb,
Sure.
right? Okay. So there's a few things that define us as human. What else from a self philosophical point of view is a name, right? Usually we as humans have names.
Yeah, I reject this, but go ahead.
Okay, no, why?
Because I don't think that having a name has any bearing on whether or not you should get moral consideration in society.
No, but as a human, we usually like interact with humans with names, right?
Okay.
Okay. So there's some things that we build like ourselves to be as human. Like what what I don't understand, because what you're trying to say is we can't abort fetuses because they're humans and they have the rights like everyone else, right?
Well, from an
So like
ethical
with
point of view, yeah, but pragmatically, I would never be in favor of banning abortion. But go ahead.
no, I know. I really respect that, by the way.
Okay. Yep.
But from a different like so your only reason is that you think fetuses are human.
Yeah, it's the best definition I can come up with. Yeah.
So would you say that stems from your like past as like like someone who's been in religion?
Well, no, it's just I'm searching for the most consistent definition of what is human and like formation of
But there is no
zygote.
definition of human, that's the thing.
Well, of course. So my
So
definition is the moment of conception. That's what I choose because it's kind of arbitrary, but it seems to be the best, the one that makes me feel the best, I guess.
so you'd argue like the embryo
The
is
zygote, yeah, the literal second the
the
ovum and
zygote.
the semen come together or whatever.
You see, that's the problem where like you can't really argue against that, but I do want to try to argue against some kind of more like strong definition of human.
Why I feel like my definition is the strongest. That's why I like it. If you've got a better definition, then I'll.
You like it because that's the I mean, yeah, sure, you can like that, but I mean, most people wouldn't classify that as like the strong like as a strong definition of a human. It's just an embryo.
Okay. Yeah. What's your definition then?
So my definition is generally someone who's alive or someone who has
Oh yeah.
consciousness.
Hold on. Wait. Wait. Okay.
And
One thing at a time. So someone who's
yeah,
alive. What do you mean by that?
no, okay, what I mean is like your cells are active and moving.
Okay. Well, that I mean a zygote counts as that. So you've got to choose
Sure,
a different
sure.
definition, right? Yeah.
No. I'm going through piece by piece.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So
So consciousness, then consciousness
okay. So consciousness is something that you think, and then
makes us human.
is there a reason why?
Because we can't really function as humans without consciousness. That's what differentiates us, um, from just like
Sure.
many
Okay.
other.
Just curious. If somebody is say like knocked into a coma or whatever, would you consider that person still human even though they've kind of like temporarily been like rendered unconscious?
Temporarily, no, but if it's a permanent thing, that could be debated.
Sure. So if somebody is in a coma for like 2 or 3 years
Right.
and then wakes up, was that person inhuman during the time they were in a coma?
No, no, not really. If
Because they have
someone
the
was,
potential to wake up and become human again, or they right?
yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah,
how is that
exactly.
different from a fetus in terms of experiencing consciousness when a fetus will eventually grow to be conscious?
Because they never like there's a starting point for someone in a coma, right?
Uh-huh.
They were defined as a human. They go into a coma and they come out and they didn't lose the ability. the existence of being a human during that point, but a fetus never has that from the start. This is something like this is not like this is a philosophical like, debate,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, I understand. I guess I'm just
Okay.
I'm not really comfortable with that, but okay.
Okay, that's fine. What about like a human form? Like I'm talking very generally a human form,
What does human form mean?
not like an animal.
I
It's
I
very
mean, humans
general,
are a
but
type
just
of animal. What does that mean?
right, but not like a dog. Like just we're bipedal for the most part and 2 arms, a head.
Like, do
Obviously,
gorillas count as like human form or?
somewhat they're very close to us, but they're not human because they don't possess some of the other things that right?
Okay.
You don't have to completely agree with that. That's fine.
Okay,
Okay,
sure.
what about the ability to think or the ability to feel like pain or emotion, something like that?
These just seem like dumb ways to define. Like, I don't feel like I'm a human because I don't know, because I like can feel pain that like makes me a human.
But what about the ability to think as well?
I mean, I don't feel like you can think much before you're like 2 years old. What do you mean by think, I guess?
I mean, think means you can process like more complex. Like people before 2 years old can process like visual stimuli and other like physical stimuli, all these kinds of things.
Yeah, but I mean, fetuses can as well. They hear things in the womb, right? By a certain
Yeah,
age.
but there's no evidence that they really process that.
Well,
Sure,
of
you
course there is. There is evidence,
is
I think.
there?
I'm sorry. Yeah, hold on. Sorry. So, like, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
that like you can listen to different things in the womb that will elicit certain responses. Isn't there? I feel like I might be making this up. I would have to look it up. But can't fetuses identify voices in the womb? I feel like there's like empirical data that shows that as well. But I know that they respond to
But
different types
during
of
which
music.
terms is because okay, so if I make take a break from the definition of human for a moment,
Uh huh.
I do want to kind of take this from the point of so you took a stance when you were debating incest that it was a morally neutral action, right?
Generally, yeah.
Like you mean like in certain in certain cases, for example,
Yeah.
you're
Well, that incest
like
itself is morally
twin
neutral, right?
twin males who didn't have a power dynamic, something like that,
Yeah.
right?
So as long as you're not committing any other thing that would be morally bad, like for instance, like
Yeah,
pedophilia or something. Yeah.
I agree. So I want to take the debate of abortion from a morally neutral point of view rather than going straight to a morally negative or morally offensive view.
Okay.
And so yeah, and the reason is and the reason and like what I can go into is I can find specifics where I would argue strongly that it's a morally neutral like action to abort a fetus. For example, if you abort a fetus within the first 12 to 14 weeks, I think most of the data points to them like not really processing much, which means I can say that that's a morally neutral point, like morally neutral action.
Okay. Well, yeah, of course. I mean, that's based on your definition of who you can abort, right?
Um,
Or
yeah,
what you would
yes.
consider a human, rather, right?
Sure. But like for example, in the first 12 to 14 weeks, they don't feel pain for the most part. Like studies show, if you want
Yeah, I
sources
don't
like
disagree with that. Yeah, but
yeah,
I
they
don't
don't feel
necessarily
pain.
value that as like a human trait or something. But
They don't even kick. They don't interact with their environment.
sure.
They're not really in a human form yet.
Okay, here, listen. Let me. Okay, so let's skip all this. Okay, so I think I'm an egoist of some form or whatever in terms of like how I derive my moral systems or lack of moral systems or whatever. Basically,
Okay.
my worry is okay. I exist as a person, and I wouldn't want something to happen that would make me not exist as a person. Like I basically want to ensure that I have created a society in some way that kind of like ensures that I'm as safe as possible. So the idea that
Sure.
somebody could have ended my life prematurely is something that I'm not necessarily okay with. So in order to bring me on board with the abortion is okay meme, I feel like that's the argument, and I'm not even super strongly attached to my current abortion argument. Like I might change that in the future as well. But like that's basically where I come from. So when you talk to me about these things like, well, can you feel pain, blah 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 blah, I don't generally
Right.
care about that. What I'm more concerned is the fact that like, okay, fuck, I could have been killed at like 15 weeks, and fuck, nothing would have like protected me. Like that's pretty shitty. Like, and I don't want to expose myself to a situation like that in the future, due to like some sort of rational inconsistency. So for
What do you
instance.
mean you don't expose
Sure.
yourself
So
to
let's
something
say,
like
for instance, I come to the conclusion that okay, well, some people are okay to kill or murder, right? So
that? Right.
murdering, as in killing somebody without provocation. That some people are okay to murder in certain scenarios. That's something that I'm generally very uncomfortable with, because if I've made that concession logically, then maybe I hit a point in the future. Let's say by the time you hit 65 years old, somebody says, well, all the empirical data points that at this point you're a net drain on society. It would actually be better to kill you, and we could just transfer your wealth to your children.
So
And
you're
I'm
trying to
like,
make the slippery slope argument.
yeah, to some extent, sure. And I would say, well, hold on, wait. whoa, just because you can kill me and it would benefit society, I don't want to be fucking killed. Like, fuck that. And then it's like, well, okay, but you kind of made the same argument for abortion. How can you defend yourself now? And you might
But
still be able to, but that's kind of the thing I worried about. Yeah.
but no, I see what you're coming from. But like I guess from where I'm coming from is that I think that that doesn't really apply if you don't start off as being human. Because when you're talking about people, they're human for their entire lives until maybe some rules denote that they don't become human anymore after 65 was your example.
Sure.
But I don't really see fetuses in the same. Like I don't think that's really equivalent because they don't start off as human.
Yeah, of
until we
course. That's
make-
not, this is
until
our
we make
problem is that like the
Yeah,
definition
exactly.
of human is somewhat arbitrary, and to try to figure out what a concrete definition is very fucking hard. And I haven't heard a
Right.
good one that I like more than
Which
well
is
your genetics, right?
which is what like I don't like taking a certain stance like an exact stance on anything because there's obviously exceptions anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd probably be on board to not like not from a legal point of view because I think you should be able to get an abortion whenever, but from a morally point of view, I think it makes sense to say that it's murder after say the second trimester because a lot of things are developed.
Yeah, sure. And
But
then the way that I kind of challenge your point, and maybe this isn't rational, maybe I'm doing this more on an emotional level, but like if you give me some definition by which you've become human at this point, that means that like 5 seconds prior to that you weren't human, and I guess that's a very hard thing for me to like cognitively embrace.
so you mean like what point like in a like from one
Yeah,
second
so
to
like
another
let's
you
say you're
become
like, well,
human.
let's say it's like being conscious in the womb or whatever. Like that's when you become
Right.
human. It's like, okay,
Like
well,
the
fuck.
second
Like
you become
5
conscious, right?
seconds prior to that, I was not human, and then I just became human because I became conscious. Like, yeah, I'm not
So
comfortable
then
with that.
that's kind of like at what point does a collection of things become a pile like until let's say you have a grain of rice you keep adding grains at what count does it become like a pile of rice, right?
Well, not necessarily because I think that because earlier you referenced a kind of something when you were talking about like shape or form of a human. I would
Right.
argue that we become a distinct thing. You're not a collection or a pile. That the moment of conception is the creation of you as a distinct, separate physical entity. That is a separate, defining, like concise moment, right?
I guess I see where you're coming from, but
Otherwise,
I think
everything is like this very weird, like Loki's wagered kind of thing where I don't know where one thing starts and one thing ends, and it's like very
right.
fucking hard to find. Yeah.
I think like you said you like to make data-driven arguments, and I think that you can't
Well,
really
we can't.
argue abort.
We can't make
Sorry, what?
we can't make a data-driven argument here because this is a 100% philosophical argument. Is when do you become a human?
I
Science can't
think
tell us
it's
that.
100% philosophical, but it can be influenced by science.
Well, it's kind of the other way around, that our philosophy would influence how we would use the science to influence how we would, right? So, like, for instance, let's say, we were to say, okay, I think that when we experience pain, that's what makes us human. Well, okay,
Right.
you can think that. So now you've used philosophy to get a value for some scientific thing, and now we can use science to investigate that thing. But the only reason we're using a scientific tool to investigate that thing is because we decided to value it initially, right? So it's essentially a philosophical claim, even if we're using science to investigate it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, yeah, that
Okay,
makes
yeah.
sense. So I don't know. I can't really argue if you're like hard stuck on the conception because, like you said, it's a philosophical debate.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
can
And it's
I can
super
present,
subjective.
which I guess I was coming down here expecting maybe you'd. I'm not like shit. Like I don't. You have your opinion because as long as you agree that it should be legally available, I don't care to try to change your mind.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
didn't
And
even
I
come
think,
on
yeah,
here.
sure. Yeah.
Mainly I just I wanted to come on because I've never debated before and I wanted to try it out. And I thought that was something I disagreed with. Um, so maybe I'd try. But
Okay, yeah.
if you're hard stuck on it, um, I've got like obviously you know the science and whatnot. But
Hmm.
if you're hard stuck, there's no real like beyond philosophical disagreement that we can get further on this.
Sure. Well, hey, I love you. I appreciate the conversation, buddy.
I had a
Cool.
few more things. If you have time,
You can do one more thing. Pick one more important thing on your list. Go for it.
do you agree with universal healthcare?
Probably, yeah. I think so, yeah.
Okay. What about generally? Okay, I just wanted to ask you, like, what do you think about political discourse on YouTube?
It's fucking cancerous as fuck.
So, why do you think the left has so like? Why do you think the left has such less? Like, I'd say that the left has a lot less viewership than the right on a lot of aspects.
Yeah,
on YouTube.
the general argument that I go with, and I'm sure it's probably a variety of issues, but I think the hardest thing is that for left-leaning arguments, you typically have to be more educated to understand them, and right-leaning arguments feel very good. They're very intuitive. They're very emotionally driven, and left-leaning ones involve like there's just so much fact and shit. There's so much homework that you've got to do in order to embrace a position like that.
Oh yeah, totally. Like, I mean, because a lot of the right seems to be like fuck SJWs or whatnot, right?
Yeah, that and like
then
their positions are generally like very emotional ones. For instance, like how do you become successful? Like work fucking hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Blah blah blah. Like, okay, well that's a feel good argument, and I see people do that, and I can like intuitively believe that. So that sounds better than, well, let's talk about the structure of society and the unearned advantages and disadvantages that groups of people have. Like that's a much more complicated argument, you know?
Yeah, like there's a lot of YouTubers that like on the right or sorry on the left, like for example H Bomber guy,
Mm-hmm.
Sean
Yeah,
and
Sean and
Jan.
Jen counterpoints. Yeah.
Potholer isn't political YouTuber, but he likes to like debate like anti climate change kind of guys. And
Yeah.
generally, sorry, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like he tried to debate Crowder, but Crowder backed out
Ugh.
because he's a like
He's
an
a fucking
climate change
idiot.
scientist. So yeah, but yeah, I'd say that it seems like you need to have a little more patience, which seems like people in society don't really have patience for like thought and
Yeah, at least for the
so they'd
for the
rather
United
just
States, a lot of it just comes down to intelligence, and a lot of like
they'd rather
conservatives and
just yell.
Republicans are like
They'd
really
rather just
fucking
yell what
retarded.
they don't like. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
It's
I'm pretty sure like I've like people email me studies and shit that like social conservatives, it's like you can predict it or predict like lower IQs and whatnot than general people as well. So I mean it kind of makes sense that like if you're an idiot, you're more willing to embrace like certain positions that have no empirical basis whatsoever.
I don't know how many other people have done, but I've actually kind of like fallen into the trap. Like when I was like a few years ago, I got to listening to like Peterson, all these other
Mm-hmm.
guys, just because it was the anti-SGW thing, and from a surface point, it makes like it's logical, right? These people are saying stuff that is either just ridiculous or it's stuff that's not nuanced at all,
Yeah.
and then they're responding with something that you feel is logical and you feel good about being sided with.
Yeah.
But then if you look at them from any more point of view than just like the surface level, you get into really like
Yeah.
terrible
This
like
is the thing that
yeah.
I've discovered with conservatives actually is that like every conservative is generally one question away from absolute collapse. And I've noticed this when I
I
debate conservatives that if you ask like one question, their whole fucking shit just falls apart because they don't have anything past like this stupid like very
no
shallow surface level
I
assertion.
noticed that during the Nick Fuentes
Mm-hmm.
debate is yeah, it was every time he did that he moved the goalpost because
Yeah.
he wasn't prepared for it.
Yeah.
But I was just gonna link something in the chat. It's an opinion piece, but it's from someone who was a colleague of Jordan Peterson,
Mm-hmm.
and he realized like how because you know how Jordan Peterson always talks about like the cult of the cultural Marxist or whatnot
Yeah.
when his kind of ideology and his fan base around kind of had to have a cult like mentality supporting him,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of strange. Kind of, he's a no doubt he's a really smart guy. He's
Jordan
educated.
Peterson?
Jordan Peterson, like from an educational point of view, I think he's a smart guy who misuses intentionally his intelligence that he's either educated into whatever for bad.
Yeah, so like
That's what
this
I
is
think.
this is kind of a thing that I've noticed with people in general. This is very strange dichotomy where so to use myself as a personal example, I know a decent bit about music, more than most people, because I went to school for music, and I know a lot about like professional StarCraft because I played StarCraft at a professional level.
Right.
Knowing how complicated both of these topics are makes me very cautious when I investigate other realms. So like for instance, when I'm talking about legal shit or whatever, like I'm very cautious where it's like I don't feel comfortable making this claim. Earlier when I was talking to the one guy, it's like I don't feel comfortable like
Yeah, yeah.
evaluating the decision of a judge because I know how much there is to know about music and I know how much there is to know about StarCraft. That makes it scary for me to present myself as an expert in some field that I've only read like Wikipedia articles on, you know?
Which is why it was kind of funny, distilled like being a lawyer down to passing the bar, which anyone can do.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Yeah. So I would never like assume that anything else is simple. I'm never gonna make because I know how difficult StarCraft is. I know how complicated
Right.
music can be. I'm not gonna assume that other things are easy. But I've noticed that there are other people that do the opposite, where when they become an expert in one topic, all of a sudden they think they're an expert in everything. Elon Musk
Yeah.
does this a ton.
No,
and
because Jordan Peterson has a PhD in psychology, right?
yeah,
But he
and when
wants to
Jordan
come
Peterson,
off as
when he talks about
being-
psychology, he's pretty intelligent. I actually like
no,
a lot
no
of what he
doubt.
says. But when he starts
Yeah.
trying to talk about history or politics or social settings or
even just the law of C16.
Yeah,
he
like, it's-
purposefully misrepresents
it's
it.
cringy. It is
kind of-
cringy. Like when
I
he
kinda
came
look
out and
forward
did.
to.
Or go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead. Oh, I kind of look forward to like when people bring up C16 in the debates because it's so easily debatable and so easily debunkable what he says and what the argument against it is. Like when the guy, it was kind of an older debate, but the Twitter user that kept saying it was worded poorly, there was no really wording to it. It added 4 words to the Canadian Human Rights Act, which was gender identity and expression. That's all it
Sure.
added. It's underlined in the bill what was actually added.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like there's much poor wording about it, and it's pretty clear. And the whole notion of being able to take someone to court for calling you he if you're a woman, or if you identify as a woman on the street, is ridiculous and would never and has never happened. Like you said, until it happens, there's no real
Yeah, and
argument.
there's that subreddit like number of people jailed for C16, and every day they post another. Yeah.
I actually haven't heard of that,
Yeah.
but it seems like there needs to be, I don't know what needs to happen, but there, because all these channels that I talked about, H Bomber Guy, Sean, they don't have enough views for the stuff they're putting out, which is educating people and making people smarter, to be honest.
Mhm.
When all these other people, Steven Crowder gets millions of views per video, Sargon
Yeah.
of Akkad, no BS, I'm surprised. Like, he's not even mentally fit to be
Thankfully, he's
executed,
starting to
and he
fall
has
off a
millions of
little
views.
bit. Like his growth has slowed down a lot. So hopefully he fucking dies off and goes.
And Lauren Southern, like, she blocked immigrant ships in the Mediterranean,
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
right? And that's pretty, like, genuinely dangerous outside of rhetoric. She's pretty she's pretty
Harmless. Yeah.
dangerous.
Hey,
Or outside of her YouTube show.
just
What's that?
Sorry.
on
Yeah.
that point, hey, it's Stanley. Hey, on that point, there's a guy in this Discord that wants to talk to you about how Pizzagate is real, and the memes would be phenomenal.
No, I don't do conspiracy
Do you
theory.
want to talk about
I
Pizzagate?
no, I don't
Oh,
do
dude.
conspiracy theory. It's so irresponsible for me to do that shit.
Alright,
I don't want
alright.
to talk about one fucking line on an email that some fucking
Yeah, I
dipshit
figured.
extrapolates to some massive. Fuck that.
I
Sorry,
really
Striker.
appreciate you talking with me. It was
Yeah.
just an experiment, and I think you're I really like your debates, and it's really cool to debate you. Even though it like didn't really result in much, I think the conversation's still nice to have.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you. See ya.
Okay.